A couple of years ago, I started collecting chips from all the different casinos I've been to. Those the two newest additions to the rack, courtesy of Stone's Gambling Hall and Thunder Valley in Sacramento, as we visited on the most recent vlog prior to this one. No real reason why I started doing it, just thought it was fun. And not all these places have poker rooms, but most of them do. So just something I started putting together. Anyway, a decent amount going on in Reno poker for the next week or so, don't want to waste any time. Want to get right into that now. Also, I've reached out and popular vlogger Johnnie Vibes has said he'll be making an appearance on this vlog this week, so look for that as we check out the cash game action going on here in Reno here this week. All right, it is a Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening here in Reno. Those were some shots of the early portion of this day for me that I spent in Urrington, Nevada. Not exactly a booming metropolis, but I went down there to shoot a Silver State sights that you'll see here in a couple of weeks probably. So always fun to get out of town, I feel, as I've lived here for so long. Always enjoy any kind of work assignment that's not actually in the city of Reno. So anyway, heading over to the Atlantis now. The Ante Up Poker Tournament Series is going on there. And I'm not going to play any tournaments, but if there's a cash game going on, I'm going to see how that is. I'm not going to record probably too many hands because honestly my phone is low on juice, but if I see an interesting hand taking place, I'm going to try to roll on that and have something for this vlog. Well, it just wrapped up the shortest session that I've ever played. A guy who doesn't typically gamble too much, I've played with him a decent amount, was in the game, in a 5-hand game, and he straddles to 100, which you rarely ever see. And I'm fortunate enough to be in the hand with pocket jacks, and I make it 300. Gets back to him, and as I suspected he was going to say, because I have now 500 behind, I'm about in for 800. He says, let's put it all in. I obviously snap call, and he says, I just have a pocket pair, which means that he has 2 outs against me. And for those of you that have followed this blog, whenever there's no action left and the money is all in, I have run absurdly bad. And that was the case here because it all runs out. And then a 5 peels off on the river and he just says, uh-oh. And he just turns over pocket 5. So I play one hand and bust. Here at the Pepper Mill on what is called the 10 1/4 weekend here. It's really interesting. You have a tournament series going on over at the Atlantis where Ante Up is hosting it, and a whole bunch of players are in town for that. And I'm not sure if that was announced first or this was announced first here at the Pepper Mill, but they then announced that there was going to be 10 to 25 cash games, and there was one particular guy who kind of organizes the high stakes games here. And he ended up bringing in a whole bunch of poker pros from primarily Las Vegas, but also some from Southern California and in Northern California as well. So it's kind of like Shark Week here at the Pepper Mill. So what ended up happening was the 5-5 game that typically goes on here on Thursday nights. For some reason it's 5-5 on Thursdays and it's 3-5 every other day. That was actually done, I think, to compete with the Atlantis in a weird way of what they were doing, but it's basically the same game. So you had one local pro here who I know, who is a very nice guy and a really good poker player, one of the best poker players in town, decide that all these pros coming into his game in the back Did not make it a good game, and this 10 and a quarter game was not ideal, so he just sat in the game that I typically play in, the 5-5 game, a game that he typically does not play in. And he was the guy who ended up playing a whole bunch of hands against, which is exactly what I wanted to avoid, but no one else was giving any action. In a stretch of about 8 hands, I had pocket jacks, I had ace king, I had ace jack, I had ace jack again, I had king queen, and I had king queen again. So these are all hands that I'm normally going to be playing, and I'm basically raising with all of them. A few times I didn't get any action on them, but a few times I did, and as a result, this pro that I'm talking about, he starts calling out to the table, "Every hand Ben, every hand Ben." He thinks I'm trying to run over this game, but in reality, I'm just in this weird stretch of getting a whole bunch of playable hands. And I'm not just going to fold these playable hands just because I've raised too many hands in a row. I mentioned, I said I had pocket jacks. He ends up opening again, and I re-raise him to 80, and he calls. The flop is ace 4-5 with 2 spades. It goes check, check. The turn's an 8. He bets 75. I'm not prepared to give up at this point, so I make the call. River comes a queen, and he ends up putting me all in for, I'm gonna say, about $700 on the river. So could easily be a bluff, but if he has obviously ace queen, but even a hand like ace jack, maybe even ace 10, I do think that he recognizes that it's the best hand and thinks I might put him on a bluff, and would go ahead and put me all in there, trying to win my whole stack. So wasn't really sure, but ultimately I decided on a fold. Didn't get to see what he had in that one, but definitely a high possibility of the fact that I was bluffed, but who knows. Shortly after that, where I picked up pocket kings, it was actually a 3-way pot, and he ended up putting me all in again on the river, and I thought that he would think there's no way I would want to fold here, so I ended up folding, and he ended up showing ace-5 offsuit for a stone-cold bluff. So he ended up outplaying me pretty bad with that hand. So it led me to this next hand where I pick up pocket jacks again. And I was in early position in this hand. I open to 25, he makes the call. The flop is 7-7-4. I bet 65. He raises to 160. And after that hand with the pocket kings that I didn't really break down, but I still ended up losing a decent amount, I only have 320 left out of my buy-in. It's not going very well for me at this point. I shove it all in, not prepared to fold. He snap calls. I then obviously know what's going on here. He ends up showing the 7. I believe he had an 8 with it. I think he had 7-8 offsuit that he called me with. But at that point, I was already making my way over to the cashier to buy more chips. So this rush of premium hands does nothing more than get me felted against a guy who's playing well, but also running extremely well. Something that he's done against me for several years, and he knows it. That was put on display last week in a 5-10 game that I didn't get any video of, but I flop a set of 5s, and he has king-9 offsuit, and he flops just a pair of 9s on a ace-9-5 flop, and in pretty typical fashion. I didn't slow play the hand, and he goes runner for a bigger full house. So that's just the way he tends to run against me, and that carried over into this game. So I rebuy, and in one of the rare occasions in this game where I get into a hand with someone else other than this pro that I'm talking about, there's a woman in the game about my age. And when it comes to women in poker, I've noticed something very specific. You have women pros, a decent amount of women pros, women who are just very smart and they realize there's money to be made at poker. So you've seen plenty of those. I've also seen plenty of women whose boyfriends play and they play with them. Some of them play pretty well, others play a smaller game or whatever the case may be. But the one thing I've never seen is a woman who has a job and plays poker as a serious hobby without any boyfriend being involved. Maybe a few older women might fall into this category, but none under 40. I've never, ever seen that. So anyway, I'm trying to figure out exactly what kind of a player this woman is. She clearly knows what she's doing. She's playing at a 5-5 game, sitting $2,000 deep in the game. So she knows how to play. I just don't know exactly how good she is. So I get into a hand with her. She raises under the gun +1 to 30. And it folds to me in the big blind with ace queen off suit. Definitely a spot I could put in a squeeze here, but ultimately being out of position, I decide just to call. So we go heads up to a flop. And it comes ace 8 for rainbow. Pretty good flop for me, obviously. I'm gonna check, see what she's gonna do. She fires 20 into this pot, so less than a third of the pot. I go ahead and check raise her, but I make it a very small check raise, trying to keep in the dominated aces that she could have. I make it 45, and she quickly makes the call. Turn card comes a 10. I bet 60, and she, again, quickly makes the call here. So I'm still feeling pretty good about my hand. Obviously, ace 10 has come in. I think she would raise on the turn if she had that. Still thinking that I have her beat the vast majority of the time. The river comes a 6. No flush comes out there. And I wasn't 100% sure much how to bet here, but I was, needless to say, hoping that she has ace jack. I bet 75. She snap calls and shows ace 6 of diamonds for the river 3 out 2 pair. So she takes that one down. She ended up going bust to this other pro that I'm talking about here later on. So not exactly a good night for her either. And finally, the final hand that I'm going to mention here comes when we get a player who I've not really seen before. Young Asian guy, seems pretty aggressive. He opens in middle position. And I'm in the small blind with pocket aces. I re-raise his $20 open to 70. And the big blind calls as well. Middle position player calls, so we're 3 ways to a flop. And it comes queen 4 deuce with 2 clubs. I bet 170. The player on my left in the big blind makes it 400. And then the hand got weird, because this player in middle position thinks about it for a long time before ultimately shipping all in for about 1,000. So I was prepared to double up this guy to my left if he happened to have pocket aces beat, but now we have a raise and a re-raise all in. I just can't see one pair being any good here. I ultimately end up folding. The player on my left snap calls, and this guy, this Asian guy in middle position, shows king 8 off suit. He has complete air. He ends up turning the king. The guy in the big blind had the ace queen, which is pretty much what I thought he had. So he ends up going bust to this dude with king 8, who makes a kamikaze move, and it ends up working out for him. He got me off the best hand. I'm still mad about it a day later, because ultimately, obviously, it would have changed a disastrous day for me and made it a pretty decent day. I still probably would have been down, but I would have been a lot closer to being even. I think the thing you got to take away from that hand is that it's a Thursday night playing like a Friday night. It's a whole lot different than the way games play during the day, and you have to factor that in. Player type as well, and it's really hard to have aces beat there, so definitely a spot where I think you could argue the fold is the correct play, but probably a call that I should have made. Ultimately, it stings either way. I end up booking a $1,600 loss on the night. This pro that I'm talking about probably won 9,000 or so, I'm gonna guess. Just crushing. He ran as good as I've ever seen anyone run in my life of playing poker in a certain day in a 5-5 game, but he's also, you know, the best player in the game. So factor those things together, and it's going to be dangerous. And I know he's going to be watching this too, so credit to him for a really good night and realizing that 10-25 game, not a game you want to play with all those pros, and it ended up working out well for him. So for me, back to it today. Well, I figured we needed some good vibes on this vlog for a change. Pleased to be joined by fellow poker vlogger in his own right, Johnnie Vibes, aka, or Johnnie Moreno, aka Johnnie Vibes.
Yeah.
From San Diego, joining us in Reno. How are you?
Well, don't sell yourself short, man. I'm sure that there's some pretty positive vibes on your channel already.
We try, we do, and it's been a fun process going along. Seeing guys like you and Andrew Nemi and Brad Owen and these kind of guys really made me want to get into this. and it's been quite a journey. So what about with you? What went into it for you wanting to really get into this vlog game for the first time?
Well, I mean, I had this like creative thing inside of me, and before it was music, I was doing some DJing, doing some production with DJing, and I had like a knack for the software, and it was fun. It was just one of those things that I used as a creative outlet for poker, because poker is my full-time thing. But then when I saw Andrew, he's actually somebody that I've known for a long time, him having success, and I thought that this could actually be something fun for me too, like a creative outlet again. And when I started doing it, my intention wasn't necessarily to make it a poker vlog. I wanted to basically have a diary storytelling type challenge that was a creative challenge for me. But once I started doing it, people started wanting so much poker. They're like, you've been playing for 10 years, playing 5-10, like tell us more about the poker, you know? So I was like, if they want to hear about the poker, we'll talk more about the poker. And then it just kind of evolved into a poker vlog. But if you notice, like I actually do it for myself still. There's like some episodes where it's more like a diary, like here's my trip to Mexico, and this is where I was with my wife, and we did this, and it's still so that I can go back later on and show it to my kids or to my wife and be like, this is the time we did that, or whatever. So.
And that's really what I like the most when you do that kind of stuff. You know, like to me, like the hands is like secondary to that stuff. That's what I'm really tuning in to see.
For sure.
The stuff with your life. What have you found with like people who actually watch these things? Like, what do they want more of? What do they want less of when it comes to your vlogs?
Yeah, so I think that it's different for every person because we all have something different to offer. And because I play a little bit of the higher stakes in the vlog, you know, genre, people want to know my thought process and they want to know my hand histories, which I get that, and I actually love sharing it because me articulating my own thoughts actually helps me. So it's something that I've had fun with and I've embraced, and I've actually really loved helping people along the way. I get messages all the time, you've really helped my game, and that's really rewarding for me. So yes, I do listen to that people want to know my thought process. That's why I put it out there. But secondly, for every episode that I give quote unquote to the fans, you know, the thought process, there's like 2 or 3 that are for me, you know, and for my wife. So I try to keep it balanced a little bit.
So what have you thought about these games here in Reno so far?
So the host here, Jimmy, he puts together a great weekend of high stakes action, and I actually love it. The games are usually pretty good. Last night I got in, the game was actually really tough. And 1025, it's actually with the mandatory 50 straddle they were playing last night.
Just not big enough without that.
Yeah, so it was a very big game for me, and I sold action. And I've actually, everyone has their next stake where it's kind of scary for them and where they're basically like taking a shot, quote unquote. And for me, 1025, especially 1025-50 more, is that shot for me. So it's scary. Like I've had really bad results playing 25-50, and you're never gonna know unless you put yourself out there. Like you're never gonna go from 2-5 to 5-10 unless you actually make the leap, because you're not gonna just wake up one day and be like, oh, I figured it out, now I can go play 5-10. You actually, it's like a process of getting your feet wet, getting crushed, come back down. And I've gone through this on every process, you know, the jump from 1-2 to 2-5, 1-3 to 2-5, the jump to 5-10, and the jump to 25, then the jump to 10-25. But the jump to 25-50 has been the most brutal for me because I lose a lot quickly. Like last night I played for an hour and lost over $7,000. So one of the things I do to mitigate that though is there's different levels of pain tolerance. And what I did is I reached out to some of my friends and I sold some action. So I get to get my feet wet at a higher stake, but I don't have to assume all of the risk, which really helps a lot.
Now, you are clearly, when it comes to the vloggers, you're the most stylish, and it's not even close, right?
Thanks,
So I mean, how did you get into that part of it too? Because you talked, I thought you had a kind of a great line on one of your early vlogs where you said, in the fashion world, I'm the fish, when you're just starting out there. So how has that gone for you in terms of that process of starting the clothing company and kind of taking it from nothing to where it is now?
I feel like fashion is a sense of your creativity. And I find myself to be naturally like a pretty creative person, which is why I did the music, which is why I do the vlogs. Like you can tell my vlogs are very cinematic, and I love to tell like a visual story. And same thing with clothing. Like I want to express myself through clothing, so it's something that I've always naturally been drawn to. So I was like, I basically had a bunch of projects, and one of the projects was, you know, all creative projects was make my own stuff, like make my own shirts, make my own hoodies, things like that. This was way before the vlog started, and it was tough. Like coming home, cutting up shirts, like trying to, like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know? I don't know the first thing about sales. I don't know about marketing. But if I didn't want to look back one day and be like, oh, I loved fashion and I thought it would be really fun to start my own company within fashion, but I never did it because I was scared, you know? But it definitely hasn't been a profitable endeavor.
Well, there's time for it, right? I mean, the bigger the vlog gets, the easier that'll be to do, I would guess. Now, by the way, probably one of my favorite things too that I saw you do, I don't exactly know how it went down, but you ended up at Golden Knights playoff games with Daniel Negreanu.
Yeah.
All right, how does that happen? Because I'm guessing it just can't get much better than that.
I mean, I went to the very first Vegas Knights hockey game. I've always been a big hockey fan, and that first game was right after the tragedy, and the way that they did the pregame ceremony, it was like 45 minutes long. Me and my wife and I, we were both teared up, crying. I was like, I love this team. And then they scored like 4 goals in the first 10 minutes.
Right, against Phoenix.
I was like, I'm hooked. Like, I'm a lifelong Vegas Knights fan. Plus, I lived there for 5 years, so it was an easy transition. And then just connecting with Daniel, like, we were 1 degree of separation because my wife is good friends with his now ex-girlfriend Marissa, and because of that, and because of ours and Daniel's shared love of hockey and poker, just started crossing paths a little bit, and he started inviting me to the games, and man, he's got great seats too. It's just, what an experience. It was so awesome.
If there's ever a seat open, call your boy, man. I got to get with you guys to that.
I see where
man, you can't. How exciting is this, by the way, for year 2? I mean, I can't even express it because obviously this loss in the finals was brutal, but only the second year, and now we got to expect big things.
There's expectations for sure. Did you actually get to make it to any games this year?
I got to the Nashville game on like January 3rd, somewhere around there, where they shut out Nashville at home. Fleury just was sit on his head the whole game.
Yeah, he's a beast.
I've been to dozens and dozens of ballparks across the country. Never have I been to a sporting event more fun than Golden Knights.
There's no experience like it. I mean, I've been to the Cowboys Stadium in Texas, the granddaddy of them all, one of the 7 wonders of the world. But the atmosphere of a Vegas Knights home game,
amazing.
That's what hooked me. So it's amazing. It's year 2. I mean, there's expectations, but I think it's gonna be fun. Like, now that I'm hooked, it's not going to matter if they're a winning team or not. Even if they're losing, like, I'm all in.
Right, me too.
I'm for it.
I'm with you. It's going to be great to see. Well, best of luck here on your endeavors in Reno in this 10 1/4 game. Should be interesting.
Thanks,
I look forward to hearing about it, and good luck with the upcoming vlogs.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
So that was my conversation with Johnnie Vibes that I had a chance to do earlier in the day. And I got to say, I committed one of the cardinal sins, if you will, when it comes to video recording. I recorded a bunch of hands that you've already seen on this vlog earlier today on my vlogging camera, and as a result the battery on that camera died. So when I went to go interview Johnnie, the battery died right as I was setting up, and it's like, I feel terrible. I've gotten Johnnie over here, he's been nice enough to agree to do this interview, and my gear goes kaput. So Johnnie, being the nice guy that he is, he just says, well, you can use mine, being a vlogger in his own right. So we taped that interview on Johnnie's camera, and he got me the video. So couldn't have been nicer, and really appreciate him coming on. And it's been good to connect with other vloggers out there. It's really cool because it's not so much a competition. It's not like I have to beat out these guys, because it's not like in radio when I knew that if they weren't listening to me, they were listening to someone else. No, people can still watch all the vlogs they want to watch because there's no set time frame on when you watch them. So that's one thing I've always liked about this medium. So I'm covering a Burning Man story today for Colo 8 News Now. This is kind of on the way out to Burning Man, where you have a whole bunch of people that are involved in some way or another. A lot of people just begging for tickets. A lot of people selling stuff. All at the gas stations and things just get overwhelmed out here. And this chick right here said, when we asked her to do an on-camera interview, she said, I get paid to be on camera. Thank you very much. I'm guessing porn.